And we are here once again on the MCU Rewatch review series, talking all things Guardians of the Galaxy, one of my favorite movies in the entire MCU. As we said on the last episode, things are kind of revving up here in Phase 2 between Winter Soldier last week, Guardians of the Galaxy here today. We got Age of Ultron next week. A lot of things to look forward to. But this is a conversation that's going to feel very familiar, as Chris and I, of course, Dr. Chris Mueller and I have discussed before here on the channel. So this is going to sound very similar. I'm going to try to discuss different topics and whatnot. But Chris, are you excited again to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, this is one of, if not my favorite Marvel movie.
Yeah, same, dude. Same. It was one of my Marvel. It actually was my favorite Marvel movie for several years until another one came out, which I'll reveal on a future episode when we get to it. But this was fantastic stuff. I know when we talked about it for the first time, which at this point was 2 years ago, which is crazy to think about. When we discussed it the first time, I'm thinking, okay, again, a lot like these reviews that we're doing now, we'll talk for 20, 30 minutes about it, be done with it. We ended up going like 90 minutes talking all things Guardians. So, again, I'll try to ask different questions. I took notes this time compared to last time, and so we may even go 3 hours. We won't go quite that long. We'll keep this on the shorter side. But still, it's such a great movie. There's so much to talk about here because it's so different too. And I think with this movie, for me personally, again, you were always very much into this stuff. You're very knowledgeable. I didn't really start to get into it. I mean, I saw the movies, but I wasn't really passionate about the MCU until the last couple of years. But even I was thinking when the movie came out, all right, I mean, there's been so many good MCU movies, but this one doesn't really have any established characters in it. You know, Iron Man was established. Captain America established. Guardians of the Galaxy, as far as I knew going into it, weren't nearly as established as part of that Marvel lore. Did you think that there was any chance that with this movie that it may not do as well as the predecessors in the MCU?
Yeah, and I think that was almost expected going into it because it was a very obscure Marvel property to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a feeling that Marvel went into this like, this is an experiment to see how weird we can get. And it ended up being like a surprise hit, and everybody loved it, and it ended up being probably one of the most popular Marvel movies at the time, and just to this day, people still love it, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, I think with this movie especially, it just proved that Marvel could just go completely outside of what we've done on Earth so far and still make it feel connected.
Yeah, that was another thing I wanted to ask you about too. This was, I think, one of, if not the, not the first, but one of the first MCU movies, I mean, including Thor, to kind of cover that space realm of the MCU, because it felt like Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, all kind of took place on Earth, obviously, and they kind of covered that ground. But this went well beyond that, where the only scene that we see on Earth in this movie, I mean, even Thor, I mean, that takes place in, on Asgard, on a different planet, whatever. But they're on Earth for most of the movie. This movie, they only show the first maybe minute or so, the opening sequence with Peter finding out that her mom passed away and whatever in the hospital. I think that's the only scene that we see on Earth. So going into it, were you looking forward to see them kind of branching out into space and seeing how they would handle it?
Yeah, I was, because the early reviews that I read were like, this is all the stuff you love about Star Wars, but with a Marvel flavor to it. So it's a big space opera, but it's got, the Marvel quippy one-liners and the Marvel signature action.
And it's great, too. I think the cast of characters that they brought in for this movie really fit the theme of the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves, how it's like this misfit, cast of characters. You have, Chris Pratt, Dave Bautista, who we know obviously from WWE, Pratt from Parks and Rec, of course, Zoe Saldana, who was in Avatar, right? I'm not mixing her up with someone else.
No, she's the one from Avatar.
Yeah, she's from Avatar. So we have her. I always mix her up with, there was someone else with a different, not Zaldana, it's something like that. But yeah, she's from Avatar. John C. Reilly, of course, from Step Brothers fame, among other movies. Glenn Close, who obviously is a very famous actor. I know her as Cruella de Vil from the 101 Dalmatians movie. But, she's in this.
I think that's where a lot of people these days know her from.
Yeah.
She's done quite a bit.
Yeah, she's done quite a bit. It's such an odd cast of characters, dude. Like, when I first heard Batista was in this, I'm like, I'm not going to go see it for Batista. I want to see it because he's in it, but not the sole reason. Because by this point, all the Marvel movies had a pretty good track record of being good. But when you see this cast of characters announced for the movie going into it, what are you thinking? Like Chris Pratt in a main role? Like, I mean, he wasn't even the main character in Parks and Rec. I mean, he was a main character, but not like the face of the show, So to then become the face of this movie, what were you thinking with the lineup they had going into this film?
Well, Zoe Saldana, I had known her from the first Pirates of the Caribbean, and obviously, Avatar and a few other things. But so I knew she would be good, and Bradley Cooper is the voice of a crazy raccoon sounded funny to me, but Chris Pratt was what actually sold me on the movie because I saw him in The Hurt Locker, and he got in great shape for that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then because he wanted to, he put the weight back on so he could play a chubby schlub on Parks again. But when they announced that, I was like, oh yeah, I know he can get in good shape if he wants to, so that won't be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he looked great. He definitely looked the part.
I was looking forward to it right away just based off the cast for sure.
You mentioned, I got to go back to this because I recently rewatched the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Not the first one I watched, the second and the third one about 2 weeks ago. Is Zoe in the second and third one or just the first one? Because I don't remember her.
No, she's only in the first one, and it's only for a couple of minutes, but she has kind of a memorable part. And I think she's even talked about this, how they had wanted her to come back in the future, but like she was unhappy with the amount of pay and stuff she was being offered.
Interesting. And then she became a household name with Avatar and Guardians, and now she's involved in the top 2 grossing movies of all time between Endgame and
Star Trek.
And Star Trek too.
She's
so yeah, she proved them wrong quite a bit. Do you think this is kind of a bit random compared to what we just talked about, but do you think we've seen the last of Peter Quill's mother's backstory being told? I know, she plays a very big part in the second movie, although she's not alive, but, he meets his dad, they talk about her and how he killed her and whatever. That's for our Volume 2 talk. But do you think there's more story to be told there with her? And maybe, I don't know if we'll see her again, but you mentioned that she was in another movie, the actress. Was it the same character? I forgot what you said about that. She was in, what was it, Captain America 1?
Yeah, she's just the girl that makes out with him when Peggy catches him really quick, and they're not like connected in any way. I think that was one of those weird casting coincidences in Hollywood where like she's not super famous, so they probably didn't catch on to the fact that she'd already been in a Marvel movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you mentioned.
I don't even think she's the only person who's done that. Like, I think there's other people who've appeared as multiple characters. They're just like background people,
Oh, 100%. Just because, there's so many background characters in these movies. Like, for example, like with the army of men for the Nova Corps in this movie, like I'm sure one of those guys was in another movie in another forgettable role in some sort. People are so, especially now with the internet, people catch on to that stuff immediately. So I'm sure if you look it up, I'm sure you'll find other examples of that happening. Hers is a bit more prominent just because, she was in a scene by herself with Captain America making out with him for a quick second. So and that's probably why people caught on to it. And, I know he makes a quick appearance in the second movie in a car. I think he's driving away from the destruction going on in that movie. But do we see the grandpa again at any point? Do you think we will see the grandpa again at any point in the MCU of Peter Quill?
It wouldn't surprise me if, like, the third movie showed Peter doing a few things on Earth, like catching up with his grandpa, for example, or visiting his mom's grave or whatever. It wouldn't shock me at all because he's literally back on Earth for the first time, even though it looks like him and Thor and the rest of them are going to take off right away to go look for Gamora. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was a few scenes on Earth before they go back to space, just because it would make sense that he would want to do a couple of things while he was back on his home planet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. I realized this when I was rewatching it, but what do you think the grandfather is thinking? His daughter just died right in front of him, and then the kid, his grandson, the kid that he was supposed to be watching after, runs away when he's not looking. So does he think that he probably just ran away and died or something right after his daughter just died right in front of him? Like, what do you think he might be thinking? Because we never get any closure on that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a pretty tragic story if you think about it. So
Yes.
hopefully, yeah, it would be nice if they put in a scene of Peter going to see him and being like, "Hey, I'm still alive, just so you know."
Yeah, I ran away and I got abducted by aliens just to let you know that it's not your fault, so you don't have to feel guilty.
Yeah, but hey, I'm a superhero now, so it's all cool.
Hey, I might have been the one who he didn't try to kill him, but like he was the reason how he almost died in the second movie with that volcano thing or whatever the hell it was called due to his dad and whatever. So yeah, hopefully we see him again in hopefully the third movie or whatever. But I know we talked about this the last time that we spoke about Guardians, but do you think when we first see Peter in adult form, of course, when he's jamming out to Come and Get Your Love, do you think that might be one of the greatest introductions for any MCU character in the MCU without even saying a single word?
Oh, for sure. I mean that scene, for one, it takes you out of the really heavy scene you just watched of a kid watching his mom die.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also completely establishes his personality without any dialogue. It's a perfect scene for his character and this movie.
It's just great, and the timing of it is great too. Like they have the Guardians of the Galaxy text pop up at like a certain point in the song, right when it kicks into the chorus. I think it's just so perfectly timed, and it's awesome. What were your thoughts on how Ronan the Destroyer, the main villain of this movie, played his role in this film?
He was a pretty disposable villain. I mean, Lee Pace is a good actor, and obviously he brought some gravitas to the role during his scenes, but, he was a one-and-done villain, so there's really not much to say about him. I mean, even Thanos is in this movie. Like, we know he's the big bad in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, Ronan more or less is there to serve the purpose of giving the Guardians something to unite against, but he's by no means an interesting or important villain in any way.
I was going to say, we see Thanos quite a bit in this movie. Like, we see him for all of 30 seconds at the end of Avengers, as we discussed about a couple of weeks ago, in the post-credit scene. We don't see him again until here. He's not brought up again until we see him here. But he's not only mentioned, he's flat-out seen. Not in his... I don't know if we see him in his actual form, or I know we see him in hologram form. I think we actually see him on his throne when Ronan goes to visit him.
Yeah, Ronan goes to the planet and...
Yeah, and he kills the other while he's there.
Face.
Yeah, they go face to face. I was going to say, he kind of comes across as a bit of an afterthought in that moment when it becomes clear, okay, Thanos is the main bad guy. They're the one that they're building to at this point. This was his first drawn-out appearance in the MCU. The most that we see of Thanos, actually, until Infinity War. Because we see bits and parts of him in the first Avengers, Age of Ultron in the post-credit scene. This was his first real drawn-out appearance. What were your thoughts on Thanos' role in this movie and how it kind of sets the stage for what we'll see from him going forward?
I mean, it's a glorified cameo. It's sort of just to establish what his goal is, which is getting the Infinity Stones, but it felt like that was done more out of necessity to set up the next Avengers movies than it was to actually make this movie more interesting. So the character... really, I mean, he literally just sits in a chair the whole time. So There's not a lot to say about his role other than, Josh Brolin is good at delivering lines and voiceover.
Yeah, no, exactly. I remember when they revealed Josh Brolin as Thanos. I forgot. I don't know if it was when they were announcing this movie. I think it was when they were announcing Age of Ultron. But, this came out before Age of Ultron, a full 6 months before it. So I'm not sure when that would have been. I don't really remember. I can't match up the timeline exactly. But yeah, I thought he was good here. I mean, again, he didn't really do anything, but in terms of delivering the lines, I thought it was good. I think the rundown of who the Guardians are was great when they line them all up and they kind of give a rundown of who they are, what they were arrested for after they first kind of, wrestle with each other, so to speak. And that's when you see Peter Quill giving the old middle finger to the cops, to the Nova Corps, and then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know how this thing worked. It's just a great scene that kind of paints a picture of what Peter Quill's all about, Star-Lord, his kind of sarcastic side and whatnot. And then we see Drax soon after, Dave Bautista, his first appearance in the MCU. Kind of a menacing character, but with great comedic timing at the same time because of how he takes everything so quite literally, because of the nature of his his character and whatever. What were your thoughts on the introduction of each Guardians of the Galaxy and how they kind of came together, but specifically Drax, when we see him kind of get his own isolated introduction in the jail cell?
I mean, I thought casting Batista was a risky move because at that point he really hadn't done much acting outside of WWE. I mean, I think he appeared in an episode of Smallville once.
You did, yeah.
As like a villain or something. But yeah, he didn't have a lot of experience, so I was very curious to see how he was going to do. And I think they wrote the role perfectly for him because the types of lines that they give him are funnier because it's coming out of a guy like Dave Bautista.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would cast just, an average-sized guy in that role, it wouldn't have been nearly as funny. But it's like the biggest, bulkiest dude in the room is also the funniest. Like, that's not something you see very often, and it worked.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's why I think he made the most of the role, and he was great at playing it, but they did a great job of writing it for him, like you said. I mean, this has to be his breakout role, right? Because after this, he was in Spectre, the 007 movie. He's been in a lot of other movies in the last couple of years. He was in, not as big of a movie, but he was in Hotel Artemis, I think, last year, among other films.
Yep.
I mean, this had to have been his breakout role, right?
Oh, for sure, and it definitely led to him getting more roles. And I actually think that between him and Cena, I think Batista is already carving out a more interesting filmography because, I don't know, did you watch Blade Runner 2049?
No, that was the other movie that he was in. I forgot about that. I have not seen it. I had to watch the first one first, and I did. I just never got around to seeing that sequel yet, but I will at some point.
He's in the movie for all of 3 or 4 minutes, but it's like one of the best scenes in the movie, and it's because of his acting in that scene.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's cool.
It's a very, like, somber, dry performance, like the exact opposite of this character, and he pulls it off really well.
The funny thing about Batista, I mean, not literally, but like the cool thing with him and his acting is that he can play a variety of different scenes. Like, is that a comedy scene or is that a straightforward serious scene that you're talking about?
In Blade Runner?
In Blade Runner, yeah.
Oh, it's very serious. Like,
okay.
There's no comedy in that movie.
Okay, that's what I figured, just making sure. So he can play like a role like that. Hotel Artemis was kind of the same thing. I think he was silent for most of that movie from what I remember, and I thought he did a good job there too. Obviously, he's comedic in Guardians. He's full-on comedic in Stuber. Did you see Stuber or no?
I saw, like, half of it, and I think something else. Like, I think I saw half of it, and then I had to start covering Raw, and I just never finished it or something.
Oh,
but,
gosh.
that was a typical buddy comedy kind of thing.
It was,
I mean,
yeah.
It's, like, the formula for that movie is basically the same formula as Ride Along with Kevin Hart and Ice Cube.
Oh, definitely.
Like, you got a big tough cop, and you got a puny little civilian who's going to say the one-liners and act all scared and blah, blah, blah. It is what it is, but I like Kumail, who's also going to be in the MCU soon. So
yeah, in the Eternals,
that'll
right?
Be cool. It would be. I would love it if if him and Batista just have a weird scene where they look at each other and they're like, "What?" and just walk away or something. Like,
yeah.
Just showing some recognition of knowing each other would be hilarious.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, they had great chemistry in that movie. I really enjoyed that movie. It's probably going to be a lot better than. I know that movie that he's in, Spy, is coming out on Amazon Prime in a couple of weeks because it was supposed to be out in theaters in March. Then they bumped it to April.
Yeah.
And now it was gone completely, of course, due to current circumstances. So it's out in Prime pretty soon. I'll probably check it out just because he's in it, but it sounds like it might be like his version of The Game Plan with The Rock when Rock was in that movie, which it was, it was a fine kids movie, but as a movie I would go back and watch a couple times, probably not. But either way, I think this
I will say I've seen My Spy already. I got a chance to see that early.
Oh, nice. What do you think?
And It is what you think it is. It is a family comedy about, a big muscly dude and a cute little girl. But I will say that it's better than the game plan. And part of the reason for that is the little girl in the movie. I can't think of her name right now. She's a great actress, and she's in a show right now called Upload on Amazon as well. And she only has a small part in it, but all her scenes are great. Like, she's a really good little actress, and I'm glad to see that she's getting more work already.
How is that show, Upload, by the way? Completely irrelevant, but I heard it was a great show.
I love it. It's very different from what I expected it to be, but at the same time, it's very unique, and it fits in with Greg Daniels' style of comedy, but a little more serious than things like The Office and Parks and Rec.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very good. I would definitely recommend it. It's only 10 episodes for the first season, so it wouldn't take that long to get through. But yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I might have to check it out. I love shows that have, like, again, 10 episodes on the shorter side, easy to get through. Again, irrelevant, and we'll get back to Guardians after this. But have you seen Have you seen the show Barry by any chance on HBO?
I have not, and it's only because I just haven't had HBO for years, and it's one of those shows that I will binge at some point. It just hasn't been convenient for me in a while.
Do you have Hulu by any chance?
I think I have it as part of like that Disney Plus, ESPN Plus package, but I don't use it that much because it has the ads, and most of the shows that I would watch on there I can just find free somewhere else online anyway.
Yeah, the ads are annoying, but I think it's currently free on there. I watched the show, again, free somewhere. I don't have HBO either. My brother had an HBO account and going to college, and he let me use it, and I watched the show from there. But you can also find it for free online if you wanted. But I think it's actually on Hulu
I'll do the
now.
HBO free trial when the Justice League Snyder Cut thing comes out.
In early 2021.
So maybe I'll check that out.
That's not a bad idea. Let me see. What was the next thing I was going to bring up to you? Oh, yeah. So the Guardians' chemistry. When they break out of the prison, I think that's one of the first real moments that we see some semblance of unity between Drax, Gamora, Groot, Rocket, and Star-Lord. What are your thoughts on their chemistry and how they kind of come together in that moment, and how this movie is really all about proving that they can coexist, that they really want to?
I mean, it was great. The whole thing with the Pina Colada song, like, so random and funny.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite part about that was, like, how impressed Drax is with him as he's flying through space, coming back to the ship. And then when he finds out what he stayed behind the grab, he thinks he's such an idiot. Like, that whole sequence just made me laugh so hard.
Yeah, no, that was a great scene, and those two lines specifically from Drax about Star-Lord are awesome. Gamora later on, kind of fast forwarding here, she mentions how, her relationship to Thanos, how she is Thanos' daughter, and how she's not really his daughter, and how she hates Thanos and whatever. It would be years before we would finally see Thanos and Gamora reunite in Infinity War. Did you think at this moment that anything of what she said here about Thanos would be setting the stage and setting up what we would be seeing in the MCU years later?
I mean, I thought, frankly, she'd be the one to kill Thanos. Or
you would think, yeah.
Nebula.
Or Nebula, yeah.
So I was almost a little disappointed that it wasn't one of them, because in the comics, I do believe it's Nebula who takes the gauntlet and kills him.
I was just about to ask you to. That was another thing I wrote down, because she says, Nebula that is, to Ronan, when Ronan's like, oh, I'm going to take the Power Stone, and when I'm done here, I'm going to come after you. And then Thanos kind of hangs up his FaceTime call, and he just kind of disappears. And then Nebula's like, oh, I'll help you because I want to kill my father. So they kind of establish they're going to kill him. They obviously don't. Thanos never sees Ronan again. Then he sees Nebula again a couple of years later. Was that kind of a throwaway line? Because they kind of emphasize the tension between Ronan and Thanos, and they never go back to that again. Did that disappoint you? Did it make sense? What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, as far as that was concerned, I just chalked that up to Ronan really not being willing to be somebody else's underling. Mm-hmm. But with Nebula, I thought it was interesting that they've established that both Nebula and Gamora want to kill Thanos, but they still don't get along with each other. And that relationship grew over the course of a couple of movies, obviously, to the point where, like, Nebula, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting characters in the Marvel movies, and there's so many places they could go with her. And I really hope that they do something interesting with her in Guardians 3, because I'm pretty sure she's going to be in it.
Yeah, it would have been very easy for them to kind of just overshadow her, because obviously you have Ronan as the main villain of this movie. Thanos kind of makes him look like an afterthought. So what does that say about Nebula? You know, it would make her kind of feel like the afterthought of the afterthought, but she actually isn't. You know, the story they tell here with Gamora and her, and how the relationship blossoms, and not just in this movie, but going forward into Endgame as well, or Infinity War. I forgot which one. I think it was Endgame. But yeah, I think she plays her role also really, really well. We also see again the Collector. We see the Collector again after he popped up in the post-credit scene from Thor: The Dark World. And this is when we see the introduction of what we've talked about before, of the Infinity Stones. So this was really when people probably started to think, right, about how, okay, this is what they're building to. Someone, whether it be Thanos or someone else like the Collector, getting all the Infinity Stones in his possession.
Yeah, and I mean, it was pretty clear that that's what the Collector's goal was, but with him, it literally seemed like he just wanted to own them. I don't think he wanted to use them.
Okay. Well, yeah, he mentioned how...
Because he's not an out-and-out bad person. Like, the Collector is a shady dude.
Yeah.
But, like, obviously Asgard trusts him just enough to give him the one Infinity Stone because he can protect it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still clearly a little shady, so... Like, he's one of those characters that I feel like they killed him off too quickly. Like, he should have been either the main villain in a movie, or they could have kept using him as, like, a random side character, because I love Benicio del Toro. So it was a little disappointing to see him, like, get killed off in Endgame before we actually really see him die, you know?
Well, yeah, he's shady enough to be like where he's not a full-fledged bad guy, but like you said, like shady enough to where he ignores the advice of the Asgardians, where they were like, oh, it's not safe to have two Infinity Stones in the same place. Yet he has two in his possession in this movie. You know, he already has the Reality Stone. Now he has the Power Stone, very briefly, of course. Or is this the Power Stone or the Space Stone?
Space.
The Space Stone, okay. So he has two very briefly in his possession. But is it confirmed that he's dead? Because they hint at Thanos killing him, but they never actually show his death. So is he confirmed to be dead by the directors?
I think when they show Thanos throw him in the little pod, and then he's like cheering for Gamora after it looks like Gamora kills him, and then Thanos reveals like that all that was an illusion and the place is actually destroyed already. I'm pretty sure the Collector's in that pod dead.
Oh, okay, because they show him disappear, the illusion version of him. Do they show a body there instead?
I think there's a skeleton in the pod.
Oh, okay. All right. I'd have to go back and watch that. I don't remember that, because I never thought they confirmed that he died, because I do want to see him brought back. Because, like, I thought his role in the, what was it, not Return of the Jedi, the 8th Star Wars movie. The
Last Jedi.
Last Jedi. He was in the movie. And then they never showed him again, even though he survived. It's like, how do you not bring him back for the 9th movie? He was like the traitor, and then they just don't follow up with that at all. I don't know. I thought that was weird.
Yeah, but that may have been one of those things where they're like, let's just separate all the Rian Johnson stuff from Star Wars for this next movie.
Yeah, probably. And they're like, all right, see you, Del Toro. We don't need you, even though I thought he was one of the highlights of that movie, and then they don't even bring him back, but... Whatever, that's probably...
Star Wars has a history of introducing characters that, like, are interesting and then not doing anything with them.
It seems
Boba Fett, Captain Phasma, Del Toro's character, like, all these people are people that any fan would be like, yeah, I'd like to know a little more about that character, but Star Wars is like, nope, they don't matter.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, fuck you. You don't get to find out more about them. That's Star Wars for you, I guess, in a nutshell. You mentioned earlier how you thought that Gamora might be the one to kill Thanos or Nebula or whatever. Drax is another one where it doesn't really feel like he got the payoff that he was looking for, because he says that Ronan was the one who killed his family. They make that kind of clear at the end, even though he says he doesn't remember initially. Then he says he does. Then Ronan dies. And then Drax is like, who cares about Ronan? Like, Thanos is the one that I'm after. We don't really ever get that Drax Thanos moment, do we? I mean, we kind of get it on when in that scene actually that where you're mentioning where they show the Collector getting, killed or whatever by Thanos, and he takes the Reality Stone. They show Thanos just kind of split Drax up into little itty-bitty pieces very briefly, and he just kind of discards him like he's trash. So we never really get that Drax-Thanos moment, do we, that they kind of teased here?
No, because Thanos, he gets killed by Iron Man. I don't think we ever see Drax fighting him in Endgame, so... yeah, it's a little disappointing that we don't get that payoff, but then again, Thanos had pissed off so many people, only one person can really be responsible for killing him, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it makes sense.
A lot of people had to be left wanting, I guess.
Yeah. They do show him fighting Thanos when they hold him down for, before Peter Quill messes up in Infinity War. I think he was a part of that battle, so he kind of gets his, gives him his comeuppance there a little bit, but he's not the focal point, which, again, you're right. You really can't focus on everyone. I've mentioned this to you before in other movies, like with the love story of, specifically in the first phase, you have Thor and Jane Foster. You have Betty Ross and Hulk. You have Pepper Potts and Tony Stark. You don't really have that in this movie. You have Star-Lord and Gamora. You have Peter and Gamora. But it's not like by the end of the movie, they're a full-fledged couple. Like, it's hinted at, but they're not like, making out by the end of the movie. Did you like the progression of the love story, so to speak, between Gamora and Peter in this movie?
I mean, it's barely a love story, really, because it's mostly like a revenge story that they just both happen to be on. But I felt like over the period of a few movies, they established their relationship well. And the fact that the movie ends with them being on good terms, it's sort of like, yeah, so then by the time the next movie rolls around, they're probably going to be a couple.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know where they really take it from there in the second movie. I'm going to rewatch that soon, so I'll figure that out. I mean, obviously, she says, I love you in Infinity War before she dies at the hands of Thanos. So, yeah, I think it's cool. What I'm saying is, like, the progression of it, like you said, it's not really a love story. It's more of like a revenge story. They don't immediately jump to, they're in a relationship. I mean, I don't really know if you can be in a relationship, like, whatever, like with this, like when she's like an alien or whatever, but... with the current situation that they're in. But they don't really immediately jump to that outcome or like jump to that end result. They let it build up and kind of, sizzle for a couple movies there before they finally drop the I love you bomb in Infinity War. It's not like she's saying at the end of this movie, oh, I love you, Peter, or whatever. Like, that would have been way too rushed. So I like that they take their time with it. Another great scene from this movie is at the very end when they're establishing a plan and it's like 12% of a plan. And they're like, oh, that's barely even a plan. And then they try to get Drax's thoughts and he was like, oh, I was thinking of something else. That's got to rank up there as one of the best scenes in this film, right?
Oh, yeah. Just the amount of humor in that scene is great. Everything as far as character interaction goes is great in this movie because James Gunn is good at writing dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So all the different scenes with all the different characters getting to know each other, like, even just the little scenes of Rocket and Peter together are hilarious because, he's like, what are you taking my ship apart for? He's like, making a bomb. He's like, why are you making a bomb? Like, he's all pissed right away. Like, it just, the dynamic between everybody is established really, really well. And that scene you're talking about in particular, I think is like, that's the scene where they finally become a team,
Yeah, no, we finally get that, come together moment, but it doesn't happen and like, oh, let's all work together, whatever. Like, they kind of take shots at each other first before they get to that result. So it's awesome. Again, from there, before we get to like the big battle scene, like it's all the little things that really make this scene so great. Or like the final 30 minutes or so when Rocket brings up, oh, I need that guy's eye, which they obviously go back to in the second movie. And again, in like, they kind of pay that off from, in Infinity War when he gives that eye to Thor, which is cool. When he was like, when John C. Reilly's character tells Glenn Close's character, or no, I don't know. I think, it was John C. Reilly when he goes, oh, yeah, he sent a message saying that he's an a-hole, but he's not, and I quote, 100% a dick. And then they were like, and then he said later, oh, they got my dick message. Like, it just, again, the dialogue, it's so entertaining, and they're constantly making you laugh throughout this movie, but not to the point where it's a comedy. It's just incredibly entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. And I think getting Bradley Cooper for that role was, like, that was a genius bit of casting, because if you don't know that's him, you can't tell it's him.
I was
Like,
just,
he masks his voice so perfectly, and it's so good.
I'm glad you said that, because I was watching this earlier with my brother and my dad goes, "Oh, who voices the raccoon? Who voices Rock?" And I said, "Bradley Cooper." He's like, "Wow, I would have never known that had you not told me that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know exactly. You would never know." And he does such a great job. I guess, I mean, not that it's obvious, but I guess you can kind of say the same thing about Groot too with Vin Diesel. Did you like? I mean, it was cool how they did such a good job of having him relay emotions. Groot that is, by saying "I am Groot" just in different ways. And I don't know if it was this movie or another movie where they had him actually say whatever he was gonna say, but they just replaced it with "I am Groot." So he said it with the same, like, I forgot what the word is exactly, but like the same, whatever.
Cadence in his voice, yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's the word I was looking for. Cadence. Thank you. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on Groot?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Vin Diesel obviously voicing a tree like that writes comedy by itself. But
Yeah.
I read something that he recorded saying "I am Groot" like 10,000 times.
Wow. Holy shit.
And then on top of that, he recorded like all the international versions too. So like that's his voice doing Groot in Spanish and Russian and whatever other languages.
That's crazy.
So like that level of dedication impressed me, but his script actually had what his lines would be in it. So he knew how to phrase "I am Groot" to sound like what he's supposed to be saying.
Oh, okay. That must have been what I was thinking of. Yeah, no, he did a great job with it. He did a really good job with it, and you would never think someone that only says "I am Groot" throughout the entire movie would be such a highlight, but he is. And again, just the delivery and his mannerisms, like, for example, when Groot kills like 20 guys in just one fell swoop with his, when he puts the branch through their, like, half of their chests, and then he just kills the other guys by whacking them around, and then he turns around when he's done and he gives that grin, just that smile. Again, just the moment.
And Drax is smiling too.
It's just one of those moments where you don't need any dialogue. It's just funny as hell. I think they just master that to a T here,
Yeah.
It's great.
It was great. That was perfect. And just in the middle of that, when they flash to Peter looking like shocked, and he looks at Drax, and Drax just kind of nods and smiles, like it was just perfect.
It is perfect. It's perfect. And everyone has, again, their moments to shine, the babyface comeback, so to speak, in wrestling terms. Like Gamora, for example, she's like, after they destroy like something with the ship, she goes, "Oh, we're just like Kevin Bacon," kind of paying off the Footloose mention from earlier on in the movie, which was great. And then I love Drax too, when he's like trashing everyone. He's like, "Oh, this dumb tree, he is my friend, and this green whore, she is my friend." And then I forgot what the guy's name is, but he starts talking shit to Gamora. Or no, it was Nebula. Nebula, actually, she was the one. She was like, she was saying something about Gamora, and he's like, he just blasts her with the gun out of nowhere. And it was, again, it's so well shot because you don't see him shooting the gun until after he shoots it. And then he's like, "Nobody talks to my friends like that." Again, just a great moment, just perfect comedic timing. It's awesome.
Yeah, James Gunn was a good choice for this because he's a bit of a weird director to begin with, and this is a weird movie, and they sort of mesh well together. But yeah, all the different character dynamics they establish in this movie pay off in all the future movies really well.
They definitely do. Yeah, there's just so much about this movie that, again, there's a lot of things, I think, with Guardians specifically, that they kind of build up throughout the entire movie that pay off big time in the end. Again, the teamwork is the most obvious one, but like the Arrow, God, what's his name? Michael Rooker's character. Yondu. I don't know why I was blanking on his name. Yondu's arrow, where they kind of tease what it might do, but he doesn't actually do anything until he kills that whole army of men. Again, in one fell swoop, it's just, then they all fall down at the same time after he kills them all, including the ship behind him. It's just great. Like, everything pays off in those final 20 minutes. Like with Groot, like he saves everyone. He says, "We are Groot." He sacrifices himself. It's a great moment. The dance-off is great. When they kill Ronan, they teamwork. They team up. They use the teamwork to kill Ronan, show that they can handle the Space Stone. It's awesome. Just everything in the final 20 minutes, I would say, is just fantastic. So, any thoughts on how they kind of closed the movie and how everything kind of came together to give us that amazing finale that it was?
I mean, I just felt like they did a great job from beginning to end in this movie. The ending in particular, not only does it cap this movie off, but it sets you up for a sequel because now they're officially a team, and they have a brand new ship that they're going to go on a quest on, and Peter is finally somewhat over his mommy issues, but he has daddy issues still.
Mm-hmm.
But everything they do at the end of this movie to close everything out, I felt was really good.
It was great. They show that Yondu has a more, good side. You kind of look at him as a bad guy, look at him as a bad guy for most of the movie for abusing, Peter and whatnot. But you come to find out they have a decent relationship, although it's kind of strained a little bit for obvious reasons. But, obviously Yondu's willing to help Peter defeat Ronan, and they do. And then they kind of switch out the orb at the last minute. All that really, really well done. Just great stuff. You see John C. Reilly then at the end of the movie when he's like, "Oh, all your crimes are forgiven. You guys are fine." And then and then Drax was like, "What if I want to rip someone's spine, from their body?" And then John C. Reilly's like, "Well, that's actually murder. So yeah, that is illegal. Sorry." Like that's just just the little things from this movie make it great, as most of the other MCU movies.
Rocket not getting that concept was great too. He's like, well, what if somebody has something that I want? He's like, that's stealing. That's also illegal. He's like, no, sir, you don't understand. I really want it though.
Yeah, I want it more. What if I want it more than they do?
Yeah, it's just so good.
It's so good. Two final things. What were your thoughts on the post-credit scene featuring Howard the Duck? And it wasn't a mid-credit scene either. It was a post-credit scene. Imagine waiting 10 minutes to see that and not knowing what it is. I mean, you probably did, but what were your thoughts on that?
I laughed my ass off because I saw the original Howard the Duck when I was a kid, and it is a god-awful movie. And the fact that they found a way to bring that character back, it made me smile because it's like, that's the one Marvel movie that either people completely forget about or they bring it up as a way of saying, like, see, not every Marvel movie is good. Like, Howard the Duck, the movie, is nothing like Howard the Duck, the comic books. And the character we saw in this felt more like the comic book character.
It's funny, too, because, well, before I go any further, do you think that this kind of fit perfectly with the Guardians of the Galaxy and how, like, the whole movie, not that it's a joke, but it's obviously comedy-driven for the most part, and then they give us Howard the Duck in the post-credit scene. It's not something setting up Avengers or whatever, it's Howard the Duck. Do you think that kind of fit well with the Guardians vibe?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was a perfect way to end it, just on a laugh. And, I mean, like, you see the dog licking the Collector's face or whatever, and he's like, why you let that thing lick you? It's disgusting, or something like that. Like,
gross. Yeah, that's what he says.
It fit really well. And I don't know if, like, I didn't even see it the first time, but apparently Howard the Duck is in Endgame.
Yes, he is. I don't know if
he comes out of one of the portals.
Yes,
like, next
he does.
To, I think Wasp, he's standing next to her or something. You can see him for like a split second.
I'm telling, I fucking love that Howard the Duck is like a meme now in the MCU, because he was in the second, obviously, Guardians movie too. A bit more than he was in this one. I don't know if you see him twice, but you definitely see him once at like the bar or whatever. You see Howard the Duck, and then he's in Endgame. Which I thought was amazing. That was one of my regrets. Like, I don't know if I tweeted it or I was just thinking it or I was telling someone, like, after I saw Endgame, I'm like, oh man, it would have been cool if he was in the final battle. And then someone on Twitter was like, well, he was in the final battle if you look really, really, really closely. Like, if you're in a big movie theater, there's a giant-ass screen in front of you. There's so many places to look during a scene like that. You literally blink and you miss it. And when the Wasp shows up, and I mean, obviously the scene's all over Twitter, YouTube now, you can go back and find it. It's in the right-hand side. You see him walk right past someone. It's not he could be in there, like some people were saying that, Nova might be in there, and you don't actually see him. No, he's actually in that scene, which I think is absolutely amazing. That is canon. I thought that was terrific.
Yeah, that was a great little just Easter egg and callback. And I know that there is a plan for a Howard the Duck cartoon on Disney Plus. Whether it'll be attached to MCU or not, I don't know. But I'm hoping that it has a level of humor similar to a show from when I was a kid called Darkwing Duck.
Oh, dude, Darkwing Duck was a great show. Yes.
Okay, so
I
yeah,
remember.
so I'm hoping that this is basically Darkwing Duck 2.0, but with Howard the Duck.
That would
That's
be
what I want.
great. Yeah, I remember that show. I can that and DuckTales was my shit when I was a kid. I remember watching those shows all the time. Yeah, Darkwing Duck was a great show. With Howard, isn't he voiced by Seth Green? Is that who he's voiced by?
And yeah, in these movies, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. So hopefully they bring him back for that. Finally, the most obvious component of this film, the soundtrack. I mean, the soundtrack's amazing. It's got to be the best soundtrack of any MCU movie, which is saying a lot. I mean, the Iron Man movies have AC/DC and other films have other stuff. But every single song, like I went out and bought the soundtrack for both this and the second movie upon seeing them because they were just so good. And they're not like modern stuff. They're all songs from the 70s for the most part, and all the songs are great, and they fit the vibe of this movie perfectly. How much does this great soundtrack enhance this film?
I mean, a good soundtrack can enhance any film, and this one in particular, they found a way to organically keep that music in by saying, well, that's the only songs that Peter has on this tape that he had with him in the 80s when he was abducted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only music he knows now, and like it's a good excuse for those songs to be in the movie. Otherwise, like, what other sense would it make for him for Come and Get Your Love to be in that movie, other than the fact that Peter's listening to it because it's the only tape he has? Like,
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, they found a good way to do it, and then like everything they do with it in Guardians 2 is good too, especially at the end when he's like, this is a zoo and holds 300 songs, and Peter's all impressed.
Yeah,
like, come on, man. You have a ship that can travel through like galaxy to galaxy, and you're impressed by 300 songs? Like,
I know. I can't wait until he finds what an iPhone is, and then he can download all the songs that he wants from YouTube and whatever. That's going to be tremendous. And I'm interested to see what they do for the third movie, because they obviously set up the soundtrack for the second movie here with the second cassette tape, Awesome Mix Volume 2, which they used in the second movie, of course. I'm interested to see if they use more modern songs in the third. I mean, I really hope they don't, but I'm curious to see what they do. Like Captain Marvel had a lot of 90s songs because it takes place in 95 or something like that, which was cool. And
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was more heavily leaning into the 80s, because there was a lot of 70s and early 80s stuff in Guardians 1 and 2, and I think maybe going later into the 80s would be something that like he would just naturally progress his music tastes through time rather than just having stuff from right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Hopefully they pick up some good songs, and knowing them based off the first two films, I'm sure they definitely will. As we wind down here, final thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris?
I mean, you know, it still stands the test of time as one of my favorite Marvel movies, and I've probably seen this movie over a dozen times just because it's on TV so much. I'll just put it on in the background when I'm working sometimes. Mm-hmm. But it's also just, it's one of the more interesting stories in the entire MCU, just outside of all the space stuff. Like, you just have a lot of different characters interacting in different ways. And I know we talked about this on the original episode we had done about this movie, but the first scene of this movie with him and his mother, like, that is one of, if not the most emotional scenes in the entire MCU, is watching a child watch his mother die. Like, mm-hmm. It does not really get much more tragic than that.
It's like, it's, you know how like a lot of Disney movies open up like the early, like Bambi when the mother gets shot, like it's like that level of intense, although it's not a cartoon, like it's real. And I think that's what this movie nails. You know, it's such variety. Like you go off from such a sad moment to a cool, endearing moment with the introduction of Star-Lord as an adult, then all the comedic stuff throughout this movie. And they deal with a lot of serious topics, between not only his mom dying in the first literal minute of the movie, but like you have Rocket, who obviously has some issues that they'll get into. I mean, Drax's mother and his wife and daughter died at the hands of Ronan. We don't see it, granted, but you know, they deal with a lot of heavy shit in this movie that kind of gets not undervalued or underappreciated, but it's kind of overshadowed a bit by the comedy. But I think that's why it's cool, because they kind of show how no matter how dark some things can be, that teamwork can prevail, and their entertaining side can kind of offer a distraction from that and whatever. Like he deals with music to kind of cope with the death of his mother and kind of use that as a tribute to her and whatever. On a deeper level, this movie really, again, it's entertaining, but I feel like on a deeper level, it's a real success in many ways, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the different topics they deal with, I mean, Gamora's race was basically completely killed off almost, so that's genocide.
And they show that too
Like
in
you said,
Infinity War, yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, with Drax's family being killed, we don't know much about Groot. But yeah,
he dies.
And like,
that's another thing. He dies in this movie too.
Gamora is a sad story, but like Nebula is just a tragic character in general because Thanos keeps experimenting on her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of heaviness to this movie underneath all those jokes.
There is, and even like with Groot, like you said, we don't really know much about him, but the guy literally sacrifices himself. Like he doesn't, I mean, he comes back, but I think it's been confirmed that the original Groot died, and that this isn't the same Groot that we're seeing now.
This is like
right?
his son, is what they're saying. So it's not the same Groot.
Yeah, so that's sad too. You know, it's some tough stuff. Some of the toughest stuff since until the dusting in Infinity War when you see everyone fade away. So again, this movie has a lot of everything. It's awesome. So I'm looking forward to breaking down the second one. Looking forward to breaking down the next installment of the MCU Rewatch review series right here on YouTube. We're talking Avengers Age of Ultron. I've already reached out to Nick. I think he's going to be joining us for the next one next week, which is cool. Looking forward to that. But people can follow you, Chris, on the Twitter machine at BR_Doctor. This has been great. I know, deja vu, we've already spoke about Guardians before, but you can never get too much. You can never talk too much about Guardians. You know, it's such an amazing movie. This has been great, Chris.
All right, yeah, for sure, man. Thanks.
Awesome. Take care, dude. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, take care.
All right, you too. Adios.